Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Yugeshni. I make videos here on YouTube about faith, health and mindset. Today I'm going to be talking about how I basically went from hating nature to absolutely loving it. Let's get into it. Now, those of you who watch me and actually know me in real life, you know that I have like a million houseplants, I garden, I go out hiking, I love being outside in nature. And a lot of you assume that I've always been this way. I have not. In fact, actually not that long ago, maybe I would say like 7, 8 years ago, I actually used to hate nature, like completely hate nature. Like the idea of me even touching earth, like soil, like really just put me off. I was just like, ugh, this is disgusting. I'm not putting my hands in that. And here I am today, literally putting my hands in the dirt. Like it's just a normal thing. I have changed my perspective on nature entirely over the last few years. And when I was sitting down to think about why or how this change even happened, I cannot pinpoint like one particular reason. I think it's a whole bunch of different things. But I think the main thing is that I simply did not understand the need or the effect of nature on us as human beings. So I grew up in South Africa, and in South Africa, we have big open spaces. Like everybody has a backyard, or at least when I grew up there, that was the case. I don't know what it's like now, but that was the norm for me. Like we had a big backyard. I used to run around in the backyard. Like being in nature, being connected to nature was normal in my childhood. And my mom used to have her own little garden in our backyard. We had trees and things like that. So it's not that I wasn't exposed to nature. I was, but I just didn't feel like connected to it. Like I didn't understand its purpose in our lives. So it was just something that was there that I didn't really care about. I think I really, in my teen years, is when I really started to dislike it. Like the idea of going outside for a walk, like touching plants, like I just thought everything was like gross. It's like, no, I don't want to touch that. No, why would I go outside? There's bugs and everything. Like I'm not going to do that. That was kind of like my thought process. And I hate insects. That is something that I still dislike, but not as much as before. Like I don't like creepy crawlies. They literally make me feel all itchy, even if they're not on me. Like it's their legs. I think it's the legs. I just don't like the legs. Maybe I have like a mild bug phobia, perhaps. But that always kept me out of nature. Now my husband is the complete opposite. He loves nature. He loves being outside. He wants to be in all the greenery. Like for him, that's just like the ideal, which was the complete opposite for me. And I feel like he really introduced me to nature from a different perspective because I just didn't care for it. I'm like, yeah, I suppose it's because I grew up having it and he didn't. Like he didn't have big open spaces all the time. So for him, going into a forest full of lush greenery was like, whoa, this is great. But for me, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, I don't really want to touch anything. It's all like dirty here and whatnot. That was my mindset before. But I've come to realize that it's the fact that I didn't understand. I didn't have knowledge about life or even just how we as humans are actually dependent on the earth that we live in. I just didn't understand the importance of it all until I started getting out there and thinking of it differently. I think it's me having more understanding and knowledge about nature, me understanding that nature actually has a positive effect on us. When I started gardening, I was in my worst phase of depression. And like I kind of forced myself to do this because I just needed something to do. At that time, I was unemployed and I was severely depressed, and just like getting out of bed to do the most simple of things just seemed so hard. And so I challenged myself to try to do a garden. And I was like, I'm not even going to care about whether it's going to work out or not. I just need some sort of activity every single day to keep me going. And that was really when I started to get into nature, because I was forcing myself to like do this and I was starting this garden from scratch. So I need to go and get all the soil. I need to fill the garden beds. I needed to figure out like what grows at that time of year, how I'm going to do that. How do I take care of all these things? I was trying to learn all of this, and I became slightly obsessed because it was the only thing that I had at the time. I wasn't working, I wasn't doing anything else, because I literally felt like I was incapable of doing anything else. So that became like my little pet project, and that kind of kept me going each day, focusing on this rather than all the other things that were bringing me down. And that's when I started to become attached. That's when I started to understand how this entire earth operates. Like, I started to understand that we are so dependent on the earth. Literally, you know, even if you're not growing your own food, everything that we consume, like, it comes from the earth. Literally, like, we need the earth. Seems like such an obvious statement, and yet that's something that I'd never really understood before. I used to be so terrified of bees because I just thought they were going to sting me and I was going to die. And once I started gardening, I started realizing that we literally need bees to survive, because bees do all the pollination in order for our food to grow. And for us to live, we need to eat. So we are literally dependent on them. And so my whole perspective was starting to change once I started to understand our dependency on the earth, the way in which the food that we consume is grown and how dependent we are on that. The fact that God created this entire earth for us, to benefit us. Once I started understanding all these things, it's just like, there was no way I could hate it anymore. It was just impossible. I'm like, I felt grateful for it now. And when I go hiking and stuff now, being out in nature, it has such a soothing and relaxing effect on me, connecting to the earth. And you will see a lot of people who are saying the same thing right now, especially people who are going through mental health difficulty. Them going out in nature actually impacts their mental health positively. That's because we are actually connected. Nature is alive. It is a living thing. It is connected to us. And I never really understood or realized that until I physically put my hand in the ground and started to learn about how all of this affects us. Essentially, that is how I became a nature girly, by literally learning why this earth exists, the fact that God created it for us, to sustain us, to help us. Just understanding that this earth was created for us, not just as a place to live, but to literally sustain us, and that we are so dependent on it. And the way in which nature works is just mind-blowing. Every time I learn some new fact about how nature works, I am just in absolute awe, and I'm like, subhanallah, like, you made this for us. Like, I just can't get over it. Like, simple things like photosynthesis, like, you guys, like, this is like the most, like, I just cannot. You know, we just look at plants and we're like, yeah, okay, they don't have brains, so, you know, they're not like us, they're not like processing information. They are the most coolest things ever. I have like 25 plus houseplants now because I just want plants around me all the time, everywhere. I just think that they are so amazing. The fact that they can use the energy from the sun to literally grow things, I'm just like, hello, we don't even do that. I am just in absolute awe. And I think the reason that I disliked nature before is simply because I did not understand it. I didn't know anything about it. Yeah, I knew it was there, but I didn't know how it operated. I didn't know all these cool things that were going on in nature. Now that I know, I am just like mind blown. And it's just like, how can I not love this? This is like the coolest thing ever. And just to top it off, like, God made all of this for us. God created everything in perfect balance. I've learned so much just by observing nature. Like, if you have ever grown something, if you have ever seen a seed turn into a seedling, then into a plant, then that plant producing fruit or vegetables, which you then consumed, that entire process we take for granted. Do you not, like, realizing that one tiny seed contains all the information required to produce an entire plant that can then feed you? I'm like, whoa, okay, like, have you ever thought about that? Is that not, like, amazing? And then to go further than that, the way in which plants operate, the fact that it has its life cycle, the seed then becomes a seedling, then it grows, then it produces the fruit. The fruit itself contains seed, which will then go back into the ground to produce another plant, which will then grow and then produce more. And that cycle just like keeps going. Like, how cool is that? And the fact that plants can like survive sometimes in the most difficult conditions, like that to me is mind-blowing. Like the fact that nature can just do this. I mean, the reality is nature does not need us. We need it. We need nature. I have this plant in my house. It's called String of Pearls. It's a succulent and it has little pearls on it. One day a little pearl fell off and I was like, oh no, this is awful. I just put it back in the pot because I'm like, it'll decompose, you know, it'll go back into the soil, everything will be all good. That little pearl sprouted and started becoming its own little plant. I was just like mind blown by this. I didn't know that it could do that. I'm like, how? This thing doesn't even have a brain. Like, how does it know like that it can sprout and make a whole other plant? Like, whoa. This plant that you see in this room, in the background of every one of my videos, this used to be just 2 little vines. Now it's like 1 million vines. There were times where I thought this plant was gonna die because I was like watering it too much, I think, and then it started to turn yellow and the leaves started to fall off. I literally took cuttings of it, put it into a jar of water. It started growing its own roots and making its own plant, and now it's like this, all on its own. Again, plants don't have brains, but they can do that. They are the most resilient things that I've ever seen. Like they can go through like the worst conditions and still make it through. It's just, I'm in awe of them. That's all that I can say. I'm in awe of plants. I'm in awe of nature. Since I've understood like how they work, how they operate, there's no way I can't be. And subhanallah, the way that Allah has created everything, it's just, I can't get over it. I just cannot get over it. So yes, I just fell in love with nature. I just absolutely, I'm in awe of it. Every time I learn something new, every time I go out into the garden, and yes, I have my own little veggie garden and I continuously try to grow new things. I'm always learning. I feel like nature is teaching me. There's so much that I learn from just observing plants, observing nature, observing my environment and the way in which it works. I feel like I've learned so much from that. And that is such a blessing from Allah because He has created that. And you know, He tells us His signs are everywhere. And I 100% see His signs in nature. And I fell in love with it. And I can't go back. So, I have a little homework for you. This is not a class that you've attended, but what I would like you to do, if you were someone like me, who doesn't really understand how nature works, and you're like, nature, whatever, just go outside, just go to like your local park during the daytime when it's safe. Like, don't be silly, like don't be doing these dangerous things. Go to a safe place during the daylight hours. Just take a walk through the park. Surely there must be some nature wherever you are in the world. If you're here in New Zealand, you ain't got to go far. We've got parks everywhere, and that is awesome. This is why I love New Zealand so much. We have such ease of access to nature. Like, I don't have to go far to literally be in the forest. And I love walking through the forest and seeing how these plants interact with each other and how nature is set up, how the bigger trees are shading the little ones because they can't handle the sun, how they all operate together in harmony. Like, just go out there, just look at it, just understand and appreciate that this whole earth was created for your benefit. Just take a 10-minute walk. Don't take your phone with you. Don't have headphones on or anything like that. Just go out there and observe. If that's all that you do, I'll be pleased. So I hope if nothing else, you've learned a little bit about plants from me. But I hope you can now see that nature is actually not that intimidating. It's not really something to be grossed out by, which is what I used to be before. I hope that you have a bit of a more positive outlook on nature now. And I hope that you go outside for that walk and observe the nature around you. I hope this video has benefited you in some way. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.